feeling overloaded, or if I'm really focused on, let's say, a screenwriting project or something, then it's not as free. It's super focused, it's disciplined, and I'm putting it to use. But there's something to then just being free of everything, even all worries for a little bit. And just, I know I can tell when my mind is in a better, healthier place because my dreaming is really fulfilling as well at night. And then if I'm in a more anxiety ridden type place, or certain emotions are affecting my mind because I'm overly grieving over something, or I'm really stressed about something, it'll definitely affect my sleep, or my dream time will reflect it. So I can kind of gauge it that way a little bit, and just how you feel day to day in relation to your mind. So I think it's really important to balance, obviously the heart and that emotional part of ourselves. We call it the fourth floor of the mansion, and the mind is the sixth floor. So I want those two floors to be in harmony with each other. And I want to have joy in my heart, so my mind is free to create and to not be burdened by non-essential considerations. The consumer culture is one distraction after another. The young soul culture, just constant barrage of information, and good news, bad news, good news, bad news. No wonder why people can't find the truth or figure things out. It's almost like it's much more healthy to go to the still point a little bit every day within yourself, because so many of the answers are not out there, even though we all love good historical research, or we love connecting the dots. And at the same time, we kind of then allow ourselves to just let it just churn away a little bit inside there, and let it connect the dots, and then maybe find a creative outlet for it. Or in your case, writing another book is always brilliant, right? You're taking your research and putting it right into something that didn't exist before you sat down to write. And then as you do it, you got a book at the end. The same way I do with a script idea, or a TV series, or a screenplay, a film idea. You literally, you get the seed idea, and then you just start to build on it and add to it and feed it and dream on it. I think that's what allows for so many inventions and different possibilities to come to fruition. And sometimes it's other people who pick it up and take it to the finish line. I imagine I won't finish all the things that I would like to see make it to the big stage, or the film, or to the big screen. That's okay. There'll be others that'll come behind me and pick it up, like a passing on the baton. I'm really okay with that.
I mean, I think you both bring up such important facets of the imagination and exercising your mind, because I think that's a way that the average Joe can really become a true citizen of the United States and of our nation, is by understanding the importance of what they hold in their mind, and how they view the world and our nation is as important as going out and talking to your city councilman or doing something like that. Like, it really is our way that we can become citizens in our minds, because the power of our ideas and how we see the world is how we change and create our future.
Yeah.
Not to mention picking up on the wisdoms of the people that have come before. Like I heard you say in one of your talks, Cynthia, like, why do we still talk about Socrates? Like, why do we know his name, right? All he did was talk. But there are people and names and figures throughout history that we still do know their names. And why do we know their names? Leaders like Martin Luther King and these true leaders like Gandhi that came before us and had words of wisdom. You can trace and see the similarities in how Socrates, you can hear Socrates and Gandhi, or Gandhi and MLK, and like this passing of this torch. I think it's why it's so important what you and Matt are doing, because it's highlighting those names and really asking why are we studying them? Why are they worth studying? Well, they've got wisdom that has been carried on century after century after century to now. And it's like, what are we going to do with it?
I think it's a good point that you were re-emphasizing that people need to play a role in the thoughts they have in their head. And that might be a very counterintuitive statement to make for a lot of people. It's like, Do you play a role
Mhm.
in the thoughts that go through your head?
It's a good
There's a
question.
disturbing number of people that actually do not play a role in the thoughts that go in their head, because those thoughts are being introduced by their surroundings and they're just
Mhm.
imprinting on, because you don't have your own thoughts, to counter it, especially, like, what is the mainstream line? You hear it being said by everyone, and thus you just accept it as something that somehow is partaking in truth, that sort of thing. Or even things that we're not aware of in terms of, like, the entertainment sphere. People have to realize, especially, and the whole Netflix thing, or Disney Plus and Prime Video and all this, it's already been known through MK Ultra type studies, but just psychology in general, that when you are tired, you are going to respond to suggestion much more, vigorously. So the whole setup is that you work a job that most people probably are not the most excited to work, their 9 to 5 job, or you might be even working longer hours than that. And then, in order to detach from that, to get a little, change your brain waves to something that's more like peaceful. You don't want to think about your work, or your family, or whatever, the stressful kind of stuff. You watch a Netflix show, and you are in a state where you want it to just work on you. And you're probably also tired. You're too tired to read a book. You're too tired to even have a discussion, maybe with someone, on something that might be actually a very stimulating conversation. But you just feel like, I just want to relax and kind of veg. When you're in that state, what you're watching is working on you, on a very serious level, including your subconscious. And there are a lot of people at this point who've subjected themselves voluntarily to hundreds and hundreds of hours of things. And it's made so perfectly for you, a little menu, and you get to choose whatever suits you, whatever brainwashing suits you best. And then they start to figure you out, and they're like, would you like this other
More
kind
of
of
this?
brainwashing thing? We have more of this for you. And that's the kind of situation. So if you never have a dialogue with yourself, if you don't even have an ability to self-reflect, why do I like this, or why is this working on me, or why are there so many things on Netflix there that are of this theme?
Mm.
Like, a lot of the stuff that's increasingly going, more and more, to us having an understanding as to what is the villain's side of the story, right? This is a really common theme. Some take it really far in the kinds of things that are, villainies. And even the subject cannibalism is starting to become more and more prominent. What was the name of the something Hammer guy? Have you guys heard this crazy
Army
story?
Hammer. Army Hammer.
Yeah, Army Hammer, who
Heard this
actually
mentioned
is
a little.
like,
I don't know much about it. All I know is that was he like into cannibalism, like, or talked about it, or said something? What was it? Do you know?
there were text messages that this woman, because he was married for several years, and apparently his wife had no knowledge of this. I don't know if he has children. And he was seeing women on the side, and this one particular woman ended up sharing the text messages. And Uh, obviously, it wasn't cannibalism in the sense that she has all of her arms and legs, at least I think so. I don't know if she's missing any fingers or anything like that, but the text messages were partaking in, yeah, like fantasies of cannibalism, but also like, I want to break your bones, I want to eat, parts of blah blah blah. So what was really crazy though about this story is that, the actor from Dune, the main actor, I forgot his name.
Timothy
Um,
Timothy Chalamet or something like that.
yeah,
The younger one. Yeah.
yes. So
I
he
can't.
was
I'm saying
actually
his
in a,
name.
He was actually in a movie with Army Hammer a few years back that was based off of a homosexual love story. I haven't seen
I,
it.
I I think I've seen that. Yeah.
Okay. And there's like a big age difference. Army Hammer's like, I don't know, something like 10 years older, and Chalamet is like, 17 or something in this movie. So Army Hammer, when this whole thing comes out that he's actually into whether it's real cannibalism or fantasy cannibalism, and there's like all of the stuff now. This is the new sadomasochism, is fantasy cannibalism. And so Army Hammer is in line to do a movie with the same director that did this other movie that I referenced, where him and Chalamet play lovers, on cannibalism. And Army Hammer was supposed to be starring in this role on cannibalism. And then because of this whole thing, he loses all of his contracts, including this one. And then guess who takes up the role?
Oh
Chalamet takes up
no, the
the
other
role, and
actor.
it's out. It's out. I saw the trailer. I don't want to watch the movie. Oh,
It's like that between that and eating bugs. It's just like they're showing you exactly where they want us to go.
Ugh.
it was so weird because Chalamet actually said, I'm sorry if I'm mispronouncing his
I know,
name.
I
I
think
know
we're
that some
butchering his
people
last
like
name,
that.
but I can't remember what it is.
But he actually said, like in an interview, that he's doing this just to show that the movie wasn't written specifically for Army Hammer. And it's like, what is the point supposed to be? Like Army Hammer loses all of his contracts because he's like into cannibalism, but then we're going to make a movie about cannibalism to prove that it wasn't encouraging Army Hammer's cannibalism. Like what? It's like,
I think that's just how twisted it's gotten. Like when I always talk about the film industry, I always saw it as the good, the bad, and the ugly. And the bad and the ugly have definitely gotten a foothold in there. And God knows what some of those folks do behind closed doors or at some of those parties that go way into the night. But I do know there's a lot of good, creative, hardworking people in the
mhm,
industries. Matter
mhm,
of fact, I think across so many industries, the good people, because they really try to seduce people. And if
Mhm.
you're not really seducible, if you're not into it, if it repulses you, it just turns you off, then you're not going to get invited into those parties or into that part of the club. So I think a lot of people work with really scummy people and just have to put up with them because they're popular or they got the job and they're into that stuff. And they don't really challenge it because those people can really bite back. It's like having a rabid dog around you or something. A lot of
mhm,
the people, I mean, even look at our own political history for sure. So many of the good presidents were assassinated or suspiciously died in office. So it seems like that the bad and the ugly side of our world will basically do whatever they want. A lot of the good people who are wanting to do better things, we won't cross that line, or we rarely do. I mean, I'm not saying that there aren't people out there that are hit squads taking out cartels. God knows we need them right now. Thank God for those people that'll take up arms against some of these really, really nasty factions. But across our cultural board, I think they get away with a lot because nobody really wants to challenge them. Maybe they're afraid they're going to, put a spell on them or something. But as much as some black magician can do something like that, some white magician can come and take it right off and clear you. So it's like we shouldn't be afraid. We shouldn't let fear get in the way of challenging stupidity, ignorance, or straight up degeneracy and debauchery. We should be willing to
mhm.
stand up and call it out.
Yeah, and I think that one of the reasons why we have a lot of these, like from the villain's standpoint, theme in these movies and TV shows is because the if we have, and I'm not saying that this is the case for everywhere in the world right now, but there is a problem with corruption in leadership positions or positions of power and influence. And what better situation for these kinds of people than that the whole thing is turned on its head,
Right.
and that kind of behavior is actually worshipped, respected, and you wish you had that kind of power. You wish you had access to this kind of thing. And I think that that is increasingly how they're, for instance, there's discussions of how we need to understand the pedophile's point of view on TED Talk.
Jeez.
On TED Talk,
Yeah.
there's a discussion about this, and increasingly they're saying, like, I don't appreciate the word pedophile. It's like person into small people or something.
Yeah,
like
they've got a term for it. It's disgusting. I can't remember. But
yeah, it's like,
that's
why
what
is this
happens when
happening? It's because they don't want to go to prison for it anymore.
it's like everybody gets a label, it's like that, just everybody gets to, like you were saying before, whether it's feminism or if it's gender, or if it's race or whatever, it's like everybody's like, oh, I want my label and this is what I stand for. And if they can have their right, then I can have my right. And it gets all distorted because integrity and morality just goes out the window.
Yeah, it's taking, okay, well, here's one thing, right? A lot of people will say, well, as long as it doesn't hurt anybody, it should be fine. And this is part of how this is being introduced, this talk of pedophilia, that the argument of whether someone who's 12 years old can make a decision for themselves or not, and are they really being hurt in such a situation. This is that kind of way of thinking. You can actually take that further. It's the law of Thelema, do as thou wilt. And sometimes there's the brackets, as long as it's not hurting anybody. The law of Thelema is the Aleister Crowley law for his he actually was in charge of the OTO, Freemasonic Lodge. So this is the open worshiping of Satan. And I'm not saying that Satan is an actual, guy with horns and a forked tail and whatever. I'm saying, though, that you can have an ideology, you can have a belief system that partakes in a satanic belief system, in the sense that you do not respect the sacredness of an individual, and you think it's your right to destroy someone or abuse them or torture them. That's what I mean by like a satanic type of ideology. And so we are increasingly going into a kind of weird space where this is increasingly getting twisted to kind of go in that direction. And even today, like there are a lot of people who will unabashedly, openly say that they really respect Aleister Crowley. And they don't believe that he was actually into all of these like bad things. These are just bad rumor. These are just rumors of him. There was someone who actually made a point, Movie Salt on YouTube. She has some very interesting like kind of videos that she does. And one of them was on this whole cannibalism and monsters thing. And she actually starts out talking about Kinsey, and that Kinsey, who started the whole, sex education on children, he was actually having children have orgasms, he claims, and he was like measuring how long it would take for a child to have orgasm. And by the way, part of the category of this was if a child ran away from you screaming, that was counted as an orgasm, apparently, in his way of measuring things. He was in close contact with Aleister Crowley. So, and Kinsey is the foundation for what are now the gender studies.
Yeah, exactly.
So we have to really realize that what we have as a culture right now, we are totally empowering the absolute worst people in society, and we're giving them leverage, and we're making our young increasingly vulnerable to be preyed upon by these types of institutions and individuals. Okay, and then I'll stop talking about negative things after that. That's
No,
the
no,
last
no, but
negative
you're
thing
you're
I'll talk
right though,
about.
Cynthia. They're trying to legitimize these things. Or even earlier, you said about using the example of heroin in law school. I mean, when you start taking black market activities and you think of the history of the opium wars and the opium trade that went on for so long, and slavery for that matter. So that's legitimate. We can look in history and see how these families amassed huge fortunes on just opium trade and slavery. And now we look at today and the black market's going on. The new slavery is obviously human and child trafficking. And the drugs, there's a whole
Mhm.
smorgasbord of drugs,
It's because it's the same financial
and
system.
people. Yeah.
It's the same
Yeah,
structure.
Yeah.
That's why it's the same.
it is.
We have to realize like
I know
what
people
is at
think
the core.
yeah, and how like exactly how things resurface. Like they think these groups of people just go away and their entire ideology goes away. No, they just go underground, change their name, and just start meeting in a different place or something. It's like it's that it's that diabolical. And I think that
Yeah.
you have to open up your mind so wide that you can understand that people would be this diabolical in their machinations, and that is a huge hurdle for a lot of people. You have to be willing to say, I know I would never do this, and I think that all the people around me would not do this, but there are people out there that desire control and power that much that it's the only thing that they want, and screw everybody else.
Yeah, you're right. It's like it's not a natural phenomenon, but the way that such a thing can also spread is when you take children at a young age and you abuse them
Yeah,
and you put them into these environments. Those people, when they grow up, are not going to be, well balanced people if they haven't found a way to, heal and recenter themselves from those kinds of experiences. So that's like one way that they know that they can spread it, by actually abusing children, including their own children. A lot of these people, they abuse their own children as a way to continue. And there is a little bit of like, sink or swim kind of approach to this as well. But yeah, it's definitely not like a normal person who grew up in a loving family is, I would say it would be hard to get that kind of who has, grown up with also a firm foundation in like understanding. You have to, when you have actually worked to have the knowledge that you have, it's a lot harder for someone to confuse you
throw
and
you off.
to introduce a whole other kind of system of thinking onto you. The reason why our culture has so quickly adopted a very different way of thinking in the last few years was because they didn't have a firm foundation to begin with. They had never worked very hard to have what, again, are the thoughts in your head your own. And it's not to make people paranoid or anything, because there's a very simple, you do have a voice. You just have to meet that voice within you. You are, even Vincent, like the way you're talking about, people are very detached from themselves physically, for one thing. Like a lot of people, as they grow older, they don't know what their body is telling them, of like the body's like, oh, I'm not doing well in this area or that area. If you're not listening, that problem can get worse and worse for you physically, for health. But it's the same thing spiritually. But as you get more and more off center, it's going to be harder for you to realize like how many people are that detached from themselves, that there's all of these things within their mind that are just screaming, and they're just so locked up, and they're buried so deep that this is what, midlife crises are about. Like you can only go so long with that. And there's a lot of anger that can also build up from this. And it's a confused anger. You don't even know why you're angry,
Right.
kind of thing. So that's the thing, is that people have to not be afraid to have that conversation with themselves. That's the first step. And actually, we had in terms of really positive um, things to talk about. We actually, Matt has met this wonderful family in Alberta, the Holmes family, and they are a family that already had very good communication. Actually just talked with them this past Friday, and they had, given us a little bit of a backdrop of how, like, this family is like an academy, but the way that they explain it, they went on their journey of learning after the whole lockdown situation. So it's like fairly recent, but they started to just um, read and read and read and read, and like the whole family will read the same books, and they'll get into these discussions, and it's at a point where they are like really impressive, and they're just like the pace of learning is just increasing, and there's a healthy hunger for knowledge, which is, it's true, like at the beginning, it's like even exercising, right? Like when you are not used to exercising, the first few times that you try to do it, your body is going to be not very happy with you. You might even feel sick, a little bit sick. But then as you do it more, your body actually has an endurance that it increases quite quickly, even if you didn't have a history of exercise. So, there's a lot of elasticity in what you physically can do. It's the same thing mentally. And then
Right.
you start to have a hunger for it. Then you're like, oh my God, this is actually incredibly rewarding. I want more. And the two young girls of this family, they actually ended up, becoming involved in this youth international group that is still like in the works, but it's very impressive. And they had some of the youth from like I think South America and the United Kingdom came to visit them, and they were all just like, having discussions around the table, and these girls would report on this experience, saying like, wow, like these young people were so impressive. It just made me want to be even better. I'm like, wow, I really have to step up my game. These other young people are like, impressive for whatever way. So it's like, it's such a healthy approach. And it was like the whole family was able to go on this journey together. I really didn't think that this was like a possible situation. So this is definitely a very good model for, how to turn things around in a very short period of time. And again, for them, they said the key was that they were already communicators. So they were not actually so focused on ideas before, but they always took pride in being very good at communicating with each other and just having conversations. And so you can see right there that that's one of the things that is really becoming sick in our society, is that we are not having conversations. A lot of people are becoming increasingly isolated, or like how many times where I go out and I see like friends who are supposed to be meeting each other, and they're both on their
Oh,
phones
yeah.
at a table. Like these are supposed to be friends. It's not even a family, get together, where I get it. Like maybe you don't want to be with but it's like a friend.
I
You
see it
you
all
would
the
think you'd
time.
want to talk to your friend, and they're just both on their phones. And like I've been at restaurants where like they're beside me for like our entire meal, and they've said like just a few sentences to each other. So it's getting so bad that people are not communicating. And the reason that, again, is a very conscious thing that has been created. When you can't even communicate with another person, you can think of it as your voice has been stolen. You don't really have a voice anymore. And again, it's just things that are constantly bouncing into your head. You're just scrolling down that social media feed to
Yeah.
have things come into your mind. You're not you are not in control at all. You are not driving the ship. To the point where you can't even have like a casual discussion with a friend that you must be friends because you share things in common with this person. This should be the easiest person to talk to. Um, so yeah, it's interesting because it can be very intimidating for a lot of people. Like, how do you get to this point? And I know that my personal experience was that I had already gone into books at a young age, but this Holmes family is a very good example where they didn't even read that much. Apparently, that's I think what they were saying, but they were good at least communication, and that communication ability allowed them to skyrocket. Like, again, you should watch the interview. I think Matt's going to put it up on his YouTube page either tonight or tomorrow. What a very great lesson on how to have a very steep learning curve, and even create an academy process. Now their kids are like in their 20s and they don't want to leave home because they're like, well, why would I want to leave home when I have like a process that allows for so much wealth of discussion and challenging, and it's like it's a very optimistic, exciting thing to be able to read something and then you discuss it, you're reflecting upon it. So yeah, I told them I had to like fight back tears because I really didn't think that such a thing was possible, and they've really done something remarkable that I think can totally be repeated in other families, or even just individuals who want to get connected. That's one of the great things about the lockdown, is that Zoom became a lot more prevalent. And for some people it's just not a reality. You don't have anyone physically around you. I know I was in that kind of a situation, but you can get onto Zoom and you don't have to be limited to your physical location.
Yeah, I did watch the Holmes family. I was really touched by them as well. And it reminded me of actually quite a few different people I know. Like there's a whole family I connected with in southwestern Minnesota. They're farm folks. And it was the same woman that I had been with in Utah. It was her farm family. So when she was finally in her last stages of her life, we ended up driving back in a motorhome to the farm in Minnesota, in Marshall, Minnesota. So I got to meet a lot of her family, and I stay in touch with her youngest brother who's like my age, and listening to him talk about a lot of the things that we talk about with a lot of the farm community that's around him, and the way they come together. Like even during the lockdowns, there were about a dozen of them that got together. They slaughtered like, I don't know, 8 hogs and and shared it all. They do that with chickens a couple times a year. Just the way they're working closer to the earth, of course. I don't think so many of them are as book read, but they're very open to learning and talking about things, and also keeping a nice sense of humor. Um, Dan was saying that they just went pheasant hunting in South Dakota, and he's like, oh, Vinny, you would have loved it. All, there were like 8 of us, and we were all on the same page. He was like, and the 12-year-old was telling me about how he went to school and was schooling the teacher, and the teacher had to call the dad and say, what your kid's telling me about the Federal Reserve and this and that. And the dad said, well, you might just want to listen to what he's saying. And he gave him some references, and that teacher went and followed up and got back and said, you know what, he's right. So I think there really are like places that it's happening all around, really. And then let's be real, there's other people that are still straight up thinking that the pandemic was real, that 9/11 was exactly what they said it was. There's still people that still think that Oswald shot Kennedy and was the lone assassin. So we got to remember that as much as there's lots of people that are breaking through and learning, I am still witnessing other people that are just stuck in that box so hardcore that they're going to die with the lie. Like there's no breaking through. And it's almost like on campus Earth. Okay, you can choose to die with the lie if you want. Maybe when you cross over, you'll be able to reflect and look back and go, wow, I was really sold a bill of goods. I didn't realize how stuck I really was. And my understanding of the soul is then they can't wait to get back to another life to try it again, so that they then have to go back through it all. If they get stuck or not, well, it remains to be seen from lifetime to lifetime. It's actually kind of hopeful, and at the same time, each opportunity to have this experience is super sacred. There's never going to be another Cynthia or Brandi or video. Like, we're never going to be this combination of soul and person ever again. So even though the soul will go on, it's going to take on yet another, it might be male, it might be female, it might be of a completely different cultural setup. You might be born really, really poor, or somewhere in the middle, or really, really wealthy. So I think a lot of that is choices of the soul, at least my comprehension of it. And that's kind of liberating as well, because then you can own it. You can say, instead of blaming somebody for anything in your life, you got to own it, and you realize you're creating it, all the way to the parents that you chose to get in here and get it going. So I really find that in a strange way liberating and expansive for my looking at people and where they're at, where they're learning, how I can have basically agape, unconditional love for somebody that wants to drink himself to death. Doesn't mean I'm going to hang out with them, because I don't like hanging around hardcore drinkers. But if that's what they want to do, so be it. It's their choice to go do that. However they got there to do that. I've always had a lot of leeway for people in their choices and what they're creating. And at the same time, I'm very discerning of who I want in my inner circle and who I want to spend time with. Because if I'm not really enjoying it, or it's just very contentious, I'd rather just pull back and spend time alone and read and study more, or watch a really good film that I can study, rather than just falling asleep to something that's going to give me nightmares. I'm really choosy that way.
Yeah, I find the story of the Holmes family really encouraging, because I was going to ask you, Cynthia, because I know you and Matt encounter a lot of people in your lectures, and so I think that you have more of a pulse on like what do you think, or what are you seeing in terms of people's ability or desire to learn and be curious? So when I hear stories like the Holmes family, it's like, oh, there are families that are like, I want to learn and have a way to combat our education system, which is just memorize and regurgitate, and then you turn it into adult that listens to the news and regurgitates what you hear. Like it's ingrained in us. So I mean, aside from the Holmes family, are you seeing in your circle with Matt that, like, are you encouraged by what you're seeing in terms of people's like curiosity about learning, or do you feel like we still have a ways to go, or are you have a positive outset about of your experience so far?
I think that there's a lot of positive things happening. Like Vincent is saying, though, that it's a minority at this point, but it's kind of like it's new, and the youth that tend to be that stand out the most so far with us, that we've come into contact with, have had really good relationships with their parents. So we really haven't actually found so much youth that are like really have this really impressive level of understanding and knowledge and maturity, but also there's like a strength, and there's an optimism, and I don't know if I said morality already, but they're very moral, which is not easy to do in the world that they're growing up in, because um, you know, we are so divided right now than we've been, I think, in a really long time in terms of our culture. And the kind of things that are being taught now are that, human beings are just not good, and that we pretty much can't contribute to anything good in the world. And they have all of these different narratives of why that's the case, but that's the general theme. And so when you have youth that actually have like an incredible moral strength, because they have to confront that, in everything that they're meeting, it's not easy to have that level of strength and conviction when you're young. And so in this case, it's almost always, I can't really think of a case where it wasn't because they had a really good relationship with the parents and the parents were really good. And that was like, for instance, one thing from the Holmes family. The father had said that, I believe, that I should be speaking to my children like they're intelligent, uh, thinking beings that have the right to challenge me. And I think that right there, that's a simple thing that parents can do, which is not, I'm not talking about a liberal approach, but that you are facilitating a dialogue process with your child like they're an adult, whether they are an adult or not in their age. You're engaging them in a grown-up discussion on serious subjects that require, a certain kind of profound reflection on things. And these are like basic questions that we should all be asking ourselves of, like, well, what is the nature of justice? What is the nature of wisdom? Why is the world the way it is? Do we have to accept that the world is the way it is? And as soon as you start to ask these questions and you realize that there is something real within us as a potential, that even if you haven't done anything yet in your life, but you've already started to kind of awaken a moral conscious process in thinking, you realize that there is something actually real in this. And that's another thing, is that people are really beaten down before they even start. So they never know whether you can actually facilitate a process of change or not. And so this family, they started to just do things that are not, like, for instance, Matt is the one who's encouraged me to, be more active in my life. I was someone who was too passive, and just allowing, what was practicality, like you need money to support yourself, to pay the rent, to have food. How are you gonna make money? And then, like, you have to go to school to go make money, and all of these kinds of things, which are not, exactly how things need to work for you. And he was the one who pushed for the Rising Tide Foundation to occur, which was something that we loved so much, we did for free. We didn't care how many people were going to see it. It wasn't costing us, like, we weren't going to go bankrupt. It was, that's one of the nice things about our day and age, is at least, like, you can do a website for fairly cheap. You can set up a process where there's not a lot of overhead costs, and we just do it for the love of it. And it it builds it. If you do something because you truly love it, and you're rigorous, and you're working at it from the standpoint of not just to make money, or to, have some kind of self-serving thing, but you're doing it because you love it, and you want to share it with others because you think it's a good thing to be putting out there. There is a physical process that can take shape from that. And so these young people were also recognizing that from just the little amount of time that they were working on things, there was already a physical process that was developing seemingly on its own, like organically, because you're not actually setting out, you don't have like this checklist of, like, okay, by this time frame I'm going to have this accomplishment, in this time frame I'm going to have this accomplishment. That's like a recipe for disaster and disappointment and failure. But you are taking the right steps to facilitate something, and you're not going to be able to entirely predict how it's going to take shape, but it will always bear fruit, even if it's not on the scale that you wished. It's still building something within yourself too, which increases your capability in these sorts of things. So that was again a very interesting thing that they were able to discover these things so quickly within themselves. And it proves to yourself that this process of change for the better that everyone gets really bogged down upon, or they oftentimes they say, well, you need to have peace in the world before you can solve poverty, or things like this. And it's like, I mean, it's not like one category happens before another category happens, right? It's like you have to look out for the benefit of the other, and several things are going to be addressed all at once. But economic prosperity and the partnership in economic development within peoples and countries and everything is actually a very serious step towards peace, because a lot of the problems we have today are almost always due to economic disparity, which is one of the most hardcore forms of disempowerment. And it, at the end of the day, comes to disempowerment. This is how you get fanaticism. This is how you get these extreme hate groups that are blaming this, and this. It's because they're economically disempowered, and it has cut off their opportunities, whether it's real or not. But often, there is a certain reality to it. Cut off their opportunities for something better. So, one of the ways to solve the terrorist issue in the Middle East is economic development. And because people are not naturally bad. And even people who've lived a really hard life, who have been around a lot of crime and a lot of violence, most people will not want that if they feel that there is a real alternative, that this is a real choice I can make where I don't have to live that life. Most people will not want to live that Mad Max reality. So again, coming back to the mind actually is an instrument that people don't realize can invoke physical change. There is a physical reality. And even by you just accepting whatever is being put into your mind, because you're not in charge of your thoughts, you are affecting a physical reality by you simply having those thoughts that are not your thoughts in your mind.
Well said, Cynthia. Well said. Hey, Brandi, let's put a plug up of her book. If you guys are enjoying Cynthia tonight, we want to encourage you to purchase her first book. There it is.
Oh, there we go. I got the whole thing.
Yeah, The Empire on Which the Black Sun Never Set. And I actually have a quote. Maybe it's fitting because it is on the 60th anniversary of JFK's passing. I think
That's coming up in a couple of days.
Really cool to share this quote that Cynthia, she had in her book, chapter 7, if I recall. And there it is. It was in 1954. And it was when he was basically on the Senate floor challenging some of the policies that Eisenhower was working with. It looks like it was talking about Algeria's independence movement. But I just thought this quote was kind of fitting in honor of him. It says, the most powerful single force in the world today is neither communism nor capitalism, neither the H-bomb nor the guided missile. It is man's eternal desire to be free and independent. The great enemy of that tremendous force of freedom is called, for want of a more precise term, imperialism. And today that means Soviet imperialism, and whether we like it or not, or though they are not to be equated, Western imperialism. Thus, the single most important test of American foreign policy today is how we meet the challenge of imperialism, what we do to further man's desire to be free. And then it goes on to say, on this test, more than any other, this nation shall be critically judged by the uncommitted millions in Asia and Africa, and anxiously watched by the still hopeful lovers of freedom behind the Iron Curtain. If we fail to meet the challenge of either Soviet or Western imperialism, then no amount of foreign aid nor aggrandizement of armaments, no new pacts or doctrines or high-level conferences can prevent further setbacks to our course and to our security. And I think what's really under that too is how Kennedy was he had such a love for humanity, and his alliances with different disenfranchised countries or countries that were at the effect of imperialists, just like he was battling within our own country, which I think is really it's really underplayed. Like, I know there were a lot of people that didn't like that really did not like Kennedy, and they were kind of socially conditioned to hate the Kennedy brothers for various reasons. And then at the same time, across so many cultures, countries, and within our own different races within America, they loved Kennedy. They were all getting behind him and cheering, his stance against these globalists on at the time. I just that one paragraph really caught my attention.
Mm-hmm. And if you go further, I love the other one on the World Revolution, because it's the original American Revolution. Oh no, it's on that page in the
Right there,
middle,
right? This one.
underlined. Yeah, that one.
Yeah, behind the fact of Castro coming to this hotel in Khrushchev, there's another great traveler in the world, and that is the travel of a world revolution, a world in turmoil. We should be glad that Castro and Khrushchev came to the United States. We should not fear the 20th century, for the worldwide revolution, which we see all around us, is part of the original American Revolution. Boy, that's definitely...
That's the one I was telling you about before we started recording.
Oh, that was the one.
Of. Yeah, that was the one. I loved it. I'd seen that before. You know what also I learned from your lecture yesterday, that I think there were 8, correct me if I'm wrong, presidents that all were a part or believed in or carried the American system of political economies, were either assassinated or died a suspicious death. I did not know that, like, all of them. It was...
Yeah, every single American president that died during their term were all supporters of the American system of economics.
Crazy, you guys.
Right.
So nuts.
Like, if that doesn't show you like what they're trying to silence, I mean, censorship is not anything new.
No, that's for sure.
Yeah, and like Britain, I think they had one prime minister that was assassinated in their entire history, and they existed longer. As it's really a very high number, 8 presidents for a country that is supposed to be, a pretty strong and stable country. So that should give people an idea that there were a lot of bad seeds in the United States from the very beginning, who were trying to undo what was the formation of the republic, which was, again, the way that it took shape was a very unique, original thing. The American system of economy, there was nothing like this before it was created, and it was like, this was what was going to save every disempowered nation. If they adopted this economic model, empire would not be able to enslave you anymore, and it was spreading everywhere.
I just love that. It's just in the spirit of in the spirit of JFK, what you just said is so true. We can actually recapture it once again. I think we're on our way to that, because it does feel like this beginning of the end of the New World Order and all their machinations, just because the level of education, people being enlightened in different ways, and the exposure. There's never been this kind of exposure and light put on them. I mean, even 30, 40 years ago, it was hard to find some of the really good books. And look at what they did to somebody like Lyndon LaRouche, and how much he was battling against these same forces, and they kept marginalizing him and trying, and even put him in prison. and it was a short stay, but just the way they were messing with his ideas, which were totally backing up all of these past presidents who were either assassinated or suspiciously died in office.
Cold milk and too many cherries.
I know
Yeah,
that one, or bad oysters. That was
bad
another, right?
oysters.
Well, I want to share this quote with you guys, because I was reading this book, Vinny, that I was telling you about, the light shall shut you.
Oh
set
yeah,
you
yeah.
But there's a cool quote. I won't read it's like a long paragraph, but I'll just read this last question because I think it's a good question that everybody can ask themselves. It says, what variable at any moment dictates whether a civilization is enlightened or in the dark? The answer is in the number of souls who choose to move the energy and create that which is in their vision. What they choose is what they will create. What is your vision for the future? I think that's just so poignant to talk about, like, the power of the mind and how really what our thoughts are our thoughts, where are our thoughts coming from, what examining our beliefs and choosing a vision for the future that is based on an educated understanding of what's going on in the world and holding that. And that's what we can each do right now and in any moment that can really bring us together collectively.
There's a reason why the saying of like the pen is mightier than the sword, because the idea is really what will dictate, the huge things that shape our reality today and into the future. And people have to really let go of this idea that you have to be a billionaire, you have to have like millions of followers on social media before you can have a voice. That's not how real influence works, or a process that is really partaking in something that is going to be a real facilitator for real change, and not just, oh, I got 1 million views on this video. What does that mean? It depends on what those people choose to do from watching what they just watched. If they were all 1 million passive viewers, it's nothing. They were 1 million active viewers. Okay, that's something.
Yeah.
How do you turn people into active viewers, active thinkers?
Yeah, just like the Holmes family, you know, the example of them is such a shining example for so many people around the world to go, wow, you know, family can come together and start learning together and communicating outside of the box and have a really wholesome lifestyle. You just ripple it just within your own small community, and that's actually making a big difference. It really is.